Yeah, so this is something I bump into, when I get people and I do channelings with them, and their agenda is, I got to prove this guy's a phony. The light cannot give them something against their intentions. They want this to not work. They'll let it not work.
Mm.
Because that's what the person's choosing, you see. They're choosing to disbelieve.
Yeah,
so the light cannot show them a miracle.
Okay, so
It
my
literally
line of questioning was along those lines? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that we may bump into that sort of thing where, there may be an element there of cross-checking and so on, where they know someone out there is, needing to believe and that they need this, but it's not their job to convince them, so they may withhold that.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Perverse. This is how they operate.
Yeah. So my impression was that his reluctance or his wish to remain anonymous was to protect his family members that were still living.
Yes.
Which
yes, I believe that, and
that makes total sense. But okay, but I'm gonna make it. I have a confession. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This unidentified agent was part of the reading that Vidya did on me. So this person supposedly was me in my most recent incarnation. This Philip fellow. So I didn't know him as Philip, obviously. I didn't know he was Secret Service. I just thought he was in some branch of like the OSS or something like that. So I thought for the purposes of what we're doing, it would be very interesting to flesh this out if we could, given that there was a really, allegedly a very strong connection between me and this person who was incarnated at one point. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So that's part of Vidya's report that she gave to me just prior to us meeting. So anyway,
okay, well,
I can send it to you at some point if you ever want to check it out, because that was one of the ones that she described, and then she described some other ones that were prior to that, historically speaking, and there was a repeating theme of what this fellow was involved with. And then also in previous incarnations where there was, somebody worked for the Vatican and they were sent off to clean up some kind of corruption, and they came back and the Vatican never did anything about it. And so he was disheartened because he was trying to clean things up, make the world a better place, and he was just dismissed. So
you're a serial do-gooder.
Syria.
A man in great danger to establish order.
So anyway, I just thought that would be interesting to have that, throw this fellow in the mix, because he was kind of tied into the Forrestal story and the Eisenhower story.
Yeah, anything you want to share, please do so. I'm obviously intrigued by this, and this could well be. You see, this could well be.
Yeah.
Stranger things have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we are all interconnected. We all have history. And this recurrence of agendas and inclinations, roles in life, and so on is very strong. It's karma that will keep us coming back and picking up where we left off, in maybe a little different way, but very much a kind of similar purpose. And so this makes great sense in terms of what you're doing now and your focus, at least what you're doing with me and your website. I mean, it's right in the path.
Yeah.
So there's two aspects to this. One could be you're the incarnation, or the reincarnation, in which case there's no conflict because the larger soul is in the light. So even though you think you're here, so how could you be up there talking to yourself? I assure you it's possible.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, no, and I know that this is so. I know that this is so. And in addition to that, there are uh, what's been termed soul splits, where there can be more than one soul extension, even at the current time.
Right.
So you may have a part of you living another life in another person, very connected to you, but not in your awareness necessarily.
Right.
And so, and then there's still the larger soul up there who could speak for either one.
Right.
In the way we're doing here.
Right.
And so, but you see, I mean, I'm starting to think, well, let's think back what we were just talking about and heard. For one thing, there may be some concern about what you might take away from this revelation. You see, am I now subject to greater threat than I might have thought? Or that there might be someone else out there who might be harmed by my going down this road. And so this is why they're cautious to not give more information to people than they really need to.
Right.
And I've had to learn this in my work, because I can go directly into Akashic Records and see a lot of stuff. And that's just unilateral. It's just me doing that. Then I have to make a decision what is safe to share and won't cause harm to people. And that's not always easy. Now, I ask for guidance at all times, but I still have free will. So if my ego gets ramped up a little, I might overdo something, thinking, well, gee, I can show off that I was able to see this and able to see that, but it might cause harm, and I might make a misstep.
Right.
They're very keenly aware of all those things, and they're very careful and cautious to not overstep. So that's why that discussion happened the way that it did.
Yeah.
That they want to be gentle with you and not get ahead of you.
Right.
You can grow into a level of strength where you're going to be impervious to harm. I don't know if you're there yet or not, and they may not be certain yet on your behalf, and so on. So, right. I mean, it's nothing to feel bad about. This is just, we need their support and protection sometimes.
And there's also the aspect of like, well, is it even useful? You can get all buried in all this minutia about what happened, it didn't happen, and who this person was, and all this other stuff. Yeah. But when it's all said and done, it's not really contributing to anything that you really need to be doing right now. So
that's right. Yeah. And you're strange enough right now, just by being involved with what you're involved with, let alone having the mantle of, this sort of legacy. So I've gone down that path, and. I can't give you all the gory details, and you wouldn't have time and probably interest too. But I'm privy to things about me, and I've been told that would be destructive to try to lay claim to certain things, because then it just adds more incredulity to the whole thing. Then it really looks like this whole thing's self-serving, and I'm just trying to pump myself up. And this is what the imposters do, by the way. They often will dangle out some tidbits of knowledge about previous doings, and you're really this great figure and that. And it's very seductive to the ego, and it can get them more entangled with the darkness. So we're always doing this little bit of a dance. And this is why my biggest challenge is to stay out of it and not care about what comes through or doesn't come through, because I can warp the process through my own fear suddenly welling up. He's trying to get the specifics that'll prove this to him, and I start feeling anxious. Then they're going to respond to that, and they may back away. So I'm not perfect in what I do. No one's perfect at anything they do. Mm-hmm. I do the best I can, but that's one of the issues at stake. That if we go really on a
mission,
a mission to prove or disprove this once and for all, that's the wrong way to approach it. It just is, unfortunately. And of course, the skeptic would say, "You're just making excuses," and so on. It isn't an excuse; it's the way it is.
Yeah.
I can guarantee it. And I've seen this demonstrated time and again. I've done a lot of channelings for people.
Right.
And I know this is how the light interacts with them.
Right.
It's need to know basis, and it's a respecting of their inner intention, whatever that might be.
Right.
If they choose to doubt, they'll live in doubt, and they'll have that forever until they choose to open up.
Right.
The light won't do it to them or for them. It'll bring something to show them, but they have to embrace it. And if they can't, the light will back away, and they won't override it to a point where they're persuaded. The miracles are usually small miracles that the believer will see and embrace, but the skeptic can still find a prosaic explanation.
Yeah.
So I could give you a bunch of examples personally, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So do you want to do James?
This is James Forrestal speaking.
Hello, James. Thank you for joining us. I would like to start with the first question, which is a little harsh, but was your death a suicide?
That is not a harsh question to me, as I care nothing about what happened in that life that was a source of pain or discomfort. Only the pain and suffering to my loved ones and to the nation, and the good I might have done had I been allowed to continue with my life. So this was, yes, a brutal killing, not a suicide, as many have discerned intuitively and read between the lines in looking at the accounts of witnesses to the aftermath and what happened prior to that event itself, including the physical evidence at the scene that did not fit a voluntary leap from an upper story of Bethesda. This was indeed a murder, and I was overpowered and thrown from the window by two large men who overpowered me and catapulted me to my death. So this was a silencing, an act of retribution for departing from the party line and threatening to reveal secrets about the extraterrestrial involvement with the United States government and the awareness that there was a sinister undermining in the communication channels that threatened to begin a program of coercive intrusion into human affairs and would result in a potential alien overtaking of the government. This was the fear I had in mind. It was not simply because I knew aliens were real and wished to make a splash in the news or help the greater awakening with a spiritual purpose behind it in bringing the knowledge forward. And it was only the government being the bad guys and the wet blankets who stifled that revelation. This was a much bigger issue than people would have seen at the time. And there was far more at stake in such a revelation. The handwriting on the wall I saw was, this was an alien incursion. And it was as much an intuitive awareness as an actual awareness of the facts and being able to connect all the dots but I knew enough to know that all was not as it seemed, even within the government and military and the alien cooperation with the government, that there was, in fact, a dark side to this and an agenda on their part that could not be trusted. I know now that this was very much a co-expression of the impulse knowledge from the light to help me become more aware, because my keen interest in understanding this was so very strong. This allowed the light to impart a greater understanding of what was truly happening. And so this is a good illustration of light work at its best, where someone with a high purpose and intention entrains the light to be a partner in bringing forth the truth. This can be true for all who seek help from the light. If they wish to do what is highest and best and have an open heart, they will be embraced and supported and guided from within. So this was very much the reason behind my death, and it was correctly reported by my dear family that I was not a suicidal person, that I was in full possession of my faculties as they observed directly in visiting me. And this was an attempt to control me physically and eventually to have me either institutionalized after being corrupted and subjugated and manipulated physically through chemical alteration to make me complacent and wipe out my memory so I was no longer a threat, or to take matters in their hands to deal with this more quickly, which was the ultimate decision made, as I was not cooperating, and the danger of an outsider being tipped off to what I knew was too great to leave this to chance, as well as interference by family who might demand oversight by outside physicians and so on. So they made the decision to terminate me quickly, and this was carried out.
Okay. Were you ever directly contacted by extraterrestrials, positive or negative?
I did have a direct communication with the gray that was recovered from Roswell. And this was, in fact, a mind communication. It was entirely telepathic. And what I did not realize at the time was used by them to insert programming to control my impulses, my impressions, and the conclusion about the exchange and the broader meaning of the alien presence. So this is the danger in talking with the aliens, that they use this as an opportunity to gain entrance to your very thoughts and your very inner being at a very deep level. And this they did in my case. So this was a deliberate attempt to throw me off the scent, to make me complacent and even positive for a time at least about their purpose for being here and what they represented for our future. The event was quickly converted into the beginning of a handshake to create a state of recognition and alliance and acceptance of their presence with the promise of working with the government. So to that extent, it was a positive experience. And in fact, there were further contacts, and the story about President Eisenhower meeting an alien is also correct. This did take place. And so the original reaction was, of course, shock and fear, but this was quickly followed by an acceptance and then a selfish impulse to use this to the advantage of the United States, to keep it secret and control any benefits that might accrue from a collaboration. And then this was followed by increasing subjugation, and the promise of such a collaboration easily allowed the crowding out of any concern about what might be a possible downside. And this is the reason that the alien abduction program, which is apparent to all in the intelligence community who have any information of this kind brought to their attention, can so readily dismiss the reports and be completely unconcerned as thinking human beings and having any concern for the fate of those humans. If you think about this, it is not logical, and it is not even believable that so many within government would be so heartless as to ignore a mammoth subjugation of individual humans and their rights to live freely and not be perturbed or manipulated by alien beings. But in fact, all are under the mind control of the alien program, and this is the real reason why this is a secret that keeps itself. It is being kept by the aliens themselves by direct manipulation of all humans privy to their presence. So I was a threat to them because my spiritual focus was strong enough to enable me to resist much of the manipulation. My keen desire for the true story allied me with the divine realm and protected my thoughts from contamination because they went against my intentions, and the divine realm shielded me from much manipulation. And this made me very dangerous to their purposes. So I was killed to keep from spreading the true information about what was happening to others in government who might have had similar inclination, and allowed the secret to be revealed.
Okay. With respect to the following excerpt from Richard Dolan's article, this is what he writes about is right after, this was your last public appearance on March 28th, 1949, and this is right after a swearing-in ceremony with Symington. So what followed after the ceremony remains mysterious. There is something I would like to talk to you about, Symington told you, and you accompanied him privately during a ride back to the Pentagon. What Symington said is not known, but you emerged from the ride deeply upset, even traumatized, upon arrival at his office. Your friends implied that Symington said something that shattered your last remaining defenses. When someone entered your office several hours later, you did not notice. Instead, you sat rigidly at your desk, staring at the bare wall, incoherent, repeating the sentence, "You are a loyal fellow, you are a loyal fellow," for several hours. That's the excerpt from the article that Richard Dolan wrote. And can you relate the details of this conversation that you had with Symington? Was there anything else that transpired during that time that changed your outlook on the extraterrestrial issue?
There are some things I can say and some I cannot, because the reputation of individuals, while not of concern to them once they transition, is still a concern to history and to the family members, the descendants, who would be adversely impacted by any association with dark doings. And this creates a karmic burden we do not wish to add to. We can say, however, that he was being used as an instrument of the alien agenda, as almost everyone is in a small or large way. And it was the recognition that allies who he thought he could count on were not open to receiving his message and were, in fact, a threat to him. So this is all we wish to say about this exchange, that the very deep inner sanctum was corrupted, and this he saw for himself and became alarmed and despondent as well, because he knew he was boxed in, so to speak, and cut off from any hope of his desires being implemented in a way that could make a difference. This is the darkest hour for all who do light work and know the truth about things. There have been countless individuals through the ages who know the truth behind what is happening, but cannot speak out, or their story falls on deaf ears, or they may already be imprisoned and sitting in a dungeon with no one to appeal to. And this is the darkest of times, and there is nothing worse than being totally closed off from any hope of rescue, from any source of understanding and acceptance, without incurring further damage to them or risks to the self, and further pain for loved ones if things end badly. This was all crashing in on him in those dark moments. So the eyewitness accounts are quite accurate. And the reason this has been burned into memory and still persists in the historical record, so to speak, is not simply because of the juxtaposition with his demise following that episode, but an intuitive awareness by those witnesses that this was hugely important to the big picture in some way. And it is that intuitive awareness that fuels the inquiry and singles this out for being an important event, which indeed it was. So the devastation to me was quite complete, and it showed me that I was truly in a very desperate isolation. And so I was simply pondering what to do. And at that point, there was not a clear path that I could see. I was not able to share all of this with my family either. And this was because I knew their safety depended on their ignorance. So I was truly cut off from humanity on all levels at that point, as I knew for certain after that exchange there was virtually no one I could trust above or below me. in the chain of command, and that the consequences would be quite dire for me, no matter how things developed, whether I would be harmed personally in a direct way was not of as great a concern as my fear for the nation and the world itself because of the implications of the threat. This was a tremendous weight, as you might imagine, and a weight that was quite crushing. The only thing that sustained me was my faith, and that was quite helpful in allowing me to remain relatively calm under the circumstances and be lighthearted even with my family and others who visited me for political reasons. I dared not let on the gravity of the situation and the deep implications of the knowledge I held, and was still not at a point where I felt I had an answer or a path I could take. And as things turned out, there was no need in the end because I was soon to be killed, which ended the matter for that incarnation.
Okay. Does the book by Whitley Strieber, Majestic, give an accurate account of the contents of your diary?
It has some things that were accurate as to content, but not so accurate as to detail. So this is true of many who enter the arena as conveyors of knowledge and insight and a desire to assist with the whistle blowing. Not all are genuine, not all are competent, not all are using their intuitive gifts in an accurate fashion. We do not wish to play favorites or become involved in a spitting contest, as there are consequences for any person who would malign another or say negative things about another. And this creates consequences for them, both in a very direct way and indirect ways as well, and then tracing back indirectly to us. So we will leave the matter there.
Okay. I'm going to skip over, there was two other questions here, but I think you've kind of answered them already. So I'm going to skip ahead to question number 7. What ET races were known to you in 1949?
What I was aware of was the alien grays with whom we first interacted in the physical sense. But I had the experience of hearing an account of a shape-shifting alien who was quite fearsome and terrifying. And so I did know there was at least one other cohort of alien beings involved with the appearance of this gray. And that was quite alarming to me because this was the first proof I had that I could rely on that shifted the balance of things away from this being a benign fact-finding mission with a scientific agenda, but rather being the surface awareness of something much darker afoot. And that was the extent of my awareness at that point in time. I was told some things by individuals around me as it filtered back to me from the interchange that was unfolding with the captured alien. But this was largely constricted and constrained by the desire of the aliens themselves to keep us largely in the dark. So we only had the merest outlines of what this truly represented. We had no awareness of the vast historical reach and history of the problem in shaping humanity all along from the earliest times, and the broad reach and presence already at all levels of society that were well entrenched. So this crash at Roswell was not a first visit. It was a routine mission that was inadvertently brought to awareness in a way that was turned into the actual collaboration, although greatly one-sided, that unfolded. And prior to that, there were many, many thousands of encounters and visitations and abductions that took place all through human history to serve the agenda of manipulation, control, and the unraveling of the human mysteries to be exploited by the Greys in their breeding program. And then in collaboration and in service to the Anunnaki as well. But that is what I know from my perspective now in the light, that this was far more than the alien Grey agenda operating at that time. So that event started the clock for a generation of UFO enthusiasts and then whistleblowers who do see the outlines of a government program currently involved with them. But the darker aspects now are known to the government, but they are subjugated to the extent they don't really care about the broader implications as they truly believe, as they've been programmed. It is in the best interests of humanity to carry out this agenda on behalf of the whole cabal. And this, of course, is entirely wrong and is inherently an evil corruption of the divine human and their spiritual focus. But it is the state of affairs that all are in the dark about the darker purpose. And most, of course, are completely unaware this is playing out under their noses.
Okay. What, if any, secret societies in control of the U.S. government were known to you in 1949?
I knew there was a power structure that superseded government, but accepted this as simply part of human culture, that the smartest and the brightest in being creative and those in the leadership by virtue of their personality, their commanding presence, and their ability to rise to the top would create a group of superstars who might well attract great wealth and power politically. And this I did not see as unusual and accepted as just the way of things. I did not realize that it was completely sinister and corrupted and serving of the alien agenda rather than a human one, even on the part of those individuals for selfish reasons, which is usually assumed. that the larger cabal of the superpowered individuals is not simply trying to increase their personal wealth and power for human selfishness, but are actually being manipulated in turn, or are direct extraterrestrial individuals serving as human counterparts physically in appearance, or descendants of Anunnaki interbreeding with human, and are well aware in their understanding and their thoughts and their soul connections. They are part of an alien lineage, and they feel very much entitled to be in charge, and that everyone else should serve them. So at the time I was living, I underestimated the true dimensions of the reach of this powerful elite. This was, again, the message of President Eisenhower with his still famous speech he gave warning America about the threat posed by the military-industrial complex, and also by the scientific elite that was a code message about the alien military collaboration, which he knew in his time was already out of control. And he had been reassured partially for a time he could regain control of things, but later came to doubt the effectiveness and realized he was in over his head as well. So he did his best to blow the whistle in that way. And this is the reason that message still resonates today and is talked about again and again and again. That is an example of the divine realm keeping the flame of truth flickering, because it is impulsed into humans to reflect on that, to think about it, to stumble upon it, to repeat it in public, in conversations and in presentations that will reach others, as a way of tickling their inner awareness. Because once that happens, the divine realm can amplify the message of his words from the speech to impart some healing as well as a greater inner knowing within each one who hears those words, that there is reason to pay attention. This is important. This should be listened to and taken to heart. This is the way the divine realm supports and collaborates with the divine human on an ongoing basis. There are many, many such examples. So all your work and every heart you open and mind you awaken, even briefly and in a small way, will receive a divine boosting of the message and the possibilities it can represent. And so your work is amplified for the greater good.
Thank you, James. We don't have too many minutes left, but I'd like to give you an opportunity to close, or to make connection with anybody who's still here and listening, and who might be listening to this interview today.
Yes, I would like to give the two of you who have arranged this communication further encouragement to keep going with your efforts. This is a choice, and we must always reflect that in anything that we do and say, for we cannot be in the lead. And this is an absolute rule that we cannot violate. As you reach out, we will answer. As you ask, we will answer. As you desire more, we will give more. But we cannot act unilaterally to come to you, to give you more than you are seeking or unaware of in possibilities, because this would be taking over the lead. So we are here as a support, but that support can be rich and detailed and intense. So there are others we know you intend to talk with, and we know that will be very, very productive. So we would simply encourage you to keep pursuing this as you choose, as we know it can lead to a great future in many, many ways.
Okay, thank you, Jim, so much, and we'll take that advice into consideration, and really appreciate your support and all the information that you've given us, and especially a thank you to you for what you went through, and for your intentions for the country and for humanity on the planet. And we'll let Karl come back now. Thank you.
Okay, hello again.
Hello again.
I was here the whole time and listening along with you and reacting inevitably and wondering, and having some curious thoughts of my own, and sometimes seeing a little bit behind what he was saying and seeing more possibilities there that were unstated. And so I don't always know what that is, whether it's thoughts going through his mind a little bit and I'm just picking that up intuitively, or whether he's sort of tickling other tendrils and other possible alleyways that we kind of go by, and he's sort of like looking at street signs and, I know there's this topic and that thing we could answer. And so I kind of get a little glimpse, but it doesn't come out in the words,
Right.
And I don't know if it's just me and my own curiosity and knowledge base wanting more of a certain thing, or whether that is a sort of a clue. They drop hints again and again and again, and many times I don't realize it at the time. That's why I like to go back and look at a transcript, because many times I'll see they said something I never knew was possible. And when I just sort of see it there in black and white, then I realize, oh gosh, this is a big clue. I could go back and ask about this and learn more. So they're just giving me just the little hint that this could be productive. This could lead to more. And then it's up to me to embrace it. See, if I don't embrace it, we're done. They're not going to hit me over the head.
Right.
So there's probably some clues like that in all of this interchange.
Yes.
They're just like little crumbs leading off in a little trail that fades from our perspective right now.
Right.
But if we back and follow the crumbs, then we get a little bit more of the story.
Right.
So as an example of the unexpected, this latter piece was completely new for me, that whenever the whistleblower opens up someone's mind a little bit and gets them to embrace an idea, the divine realm then can add to that and begin to amplify that effort. So we tend to think in black and white terms, that if we're entitled to get a miracle, we'll get a miracle. I mean, they'll come and stop the bullets, or they'll take a diseased liver and switch it around so it's okay, and someone gets to live longer, and those sort of things. Not as a day-to-day interweaving with us in the flow and flux of our very thoughts. And I'm getting that feeling now that this is really what happens, and it's very dynamic. So if you set a, so I'm very drawn to this message that came through about the partnering of the spiritually focused light worker with the, maybe more practical, boots on the ground, discoverer of truth and the curiosity driven person who's just obsessed with the idea of finding out the story of the ETs and so on, but maybe, doesn't think about God or whatever. They're still a light worker because of what they're doing. So bringing those two realms together, the idea of that, I see has great merit and great power to it. And this last little exchange, I'm eager to go back and reread it. That each time someone gets on that spiritual wavelength by pursuing something for the good, that allows the divine realm to come in and, breathe a little extra energy into that. Mm-hmm. And that's how the shift in consciousness, I imagine, is largely taking place.
Right.
It's through us creating the opportunities for the light to amplify what we do. And that's why we're the choke point, too. So.
Right. Yeah, it was a little daunting. I was like coming up with the questions and stuff, and I even went so far as to call up Michael Salla, who wrote the book that we referenced. Yeah, and I said because I was looking at these two fellows, Dwight Eisenhower, James Forrestal, and this Philip guy, and I was going, and I wanted to create a scene where the questions had a context and a sequence and everything. So I asked him if he had a timeline that he had developed for his book, where I could look at this is when Eisenhower did this, and this is when he became president, and this is when he had the meeting with so and so, and this is when Forrestal died, and Forrestal died before Eisenhower became president. I wanted to see that whole picture of what that looked like, so I could, and so I was feeling very inadequate to the task. And then at some point I felt, what? There's probably no really good way to put this together. I just need to come up with the questions, the ones that are kind of piquing my interest at that time, and go with it. But in saying that, I invite our listeners to, they leave comments and, because I know there's some really sharp researchers out there who've been looking at these issues. I mean, Dr. Michael Salla being a very good example of those people out there who have some really insightful, good questions to ask that might be able to tie in what you're just talking about, the spiritual aspect to these people's experience. They're very much involved in the history and the early disclosure, so they kind of set the stage for the disclosure movement, really, in so many ways, So,
well, and they're the ones, I think, who are, ironically, the tinfoil hat people, or, so easily ridiculed as the mainstream does. Ironically, they are the most trustable people. No, really. I mean,
no, I'm agreeing with you.
They're all corrupted and programmed to such an extent they cannot even hear the evidence and form a thought that, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I should listen. Maybe I should look into it. They cannot go there even. So the people who are all over this and interested and committed, there's something special about them that allows them to stand strong. And they're not being reached by that programming. They're remaining impervious, at least to a point.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
So isn't that funny?
Yes.
Who would have thought?
And we're just starting. On
this
track, we're just starting. I mean, I'm not aware. Maybe this has been done before, but if it has, I'm not aware of it. So anyway, I really appreciate Karl. This is such a great idea. I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Well, I know there's more we can do, and I will probably reach out to one or the other of these people just independently and ask some additional things too.
All right.
And because I think they're good sources. I think that list came up for a reason and the way that it did. And these are towering figures in having a huge karmic entanglement with this whole business. So that is part part of the currency that's needed to be the spokesperson.
Right. So,
and to be a change agent potentially. That they have a greater than average stake.
Yes.
In what happens.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'm going to mention the other two fellows that I mentioned that we might want to add to this list. I mean, they're already on the list, but it wasn't part of what we did today. And it's Bill Cooper, who wrote "Behold a Pale Horse." That's one fellow that I'm very curious about, and the other guy was Phil Schneider, who was I think I've got so many names in my head these days, but I think he was a witness to the Dulles battle that occurred at Dulles Air Force Base. I think it was in the 70s. I'm not sure. I have to go back and look that up. But I was thinking that might be two more subjects for this type of an inquiry, more modern than what we dealt with today in more recent history.
Well, so everyone needs care and feeding. We all need some rewards from life. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't have the strength to keep going. So the people who are interested in those topics and those events and those individuals and those stories are important in the big picture. So they need care and feeding. They need cultivating and encouragement. Right. So if we can help them, right. I'm all for it. Because I see very much that these two parties are necessary. Let me just give you one quick comment about this. I come from the spiritual side, the spiritual community. That was my focus, I thought, in kind of moving in this direction, but became very much involved with healing because I knew how important it is, and so many suffer and all that sort of thing. And that, of course, led me to bumping into all this stuff. All right, but that's my focus. But for a long time, I've been frustrated by the spiritual community because they have been corrupted by the alien agenda. They are being duped. They are being programmed to just sit with their happy thoughts and make happy talk to one another and give one another low-level help, what I call low-level help. I don't mean to demean it. I only mean it's like, okay, they get the starting points and they're told, well, this is what you need to do. And so they run off and they manifest and that's what they do. That's their focus, think positively, focus on the good things, you'll create those and they'll come to you, and end of story. It ain't so simple. It's much more complex. There are many impediments and areas that need healing for that to be smooth exercise. Mm-hmm. But corrupted and held down and held back. So they're not going to be able to do this on their own. They're going to need some help too. And so this whistleblowing community I see now is another important ally in this contest that we're engaged in. You can't just go to people who are spiritual and have that patina and that label and that in that behavior, and they've got the nice shiny websites and they all talk about the light and angels, or they're involved with
very important component of what's going on, but it's not the big picture. Includes this whistleblower faction and these people like David Seaman, who's very critical in exposing this whole Pizzagate thing. That's one of the Achilles heels on this whole beast that's going down right now. So, and that's dark stuff. So it has to be revealed and it has to be forgiven. And then when you're done with that, we need to do some more of it. Because we're talking about thousands of years of history where man has been at the excuse my French, the shit end of the stick, and now we're going to turn that stick into a piece of gold that we can, give to our children. So, so anyway, we've run into 3 hours here, and I have some technical limitations I'm dealing with. So, many blessings to you, Karl. Thank you so much for including me in this project. I really appreciate it. I really do.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I think we're in agreement and in alignment in all all ways here. So it feels really good, and I'm happy to be able to collaborate with you.
All right. So thanks for joining us, everybody. More to come. Bye-bye.
Bye.